Hey everybody. Doing some Facebook Live here. Sorry I'm starting a little bit late. But I just wanted to say hello from Colorado. I hope everyone's doing well today in this crazy COVID world. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about color in batiks and how they're created, I guess. How do you choose color? We talk about batiks and we say, oh, we love them. We love their color. But I kind of want to know, why don't you tell me and shoot me a quick text? And tell me what's going on as far as choosing your batiks. When you're choosing batiks, what do you look for first? Do you look for color? Um, is that, hi, Catherine, how are you? Thanks for joining. Do you look at motif? Do you look at the variation of color? Because if you say, oh, yes, I love batiks because of the color, do you notice that in the motif, there's a whole bunch of different colors versus in the background, there's a whole bunch of different colors? Um, or is it the combination of that? Do you like your multis? Do you like your multicolors in the motif and a high contrast, or do you like it more tonal? Hey, Scott, how are you? It was great to see Scott last week. He was out here in Colorado. And Scott, you want to have a hint here? He is a new guest designer for Vanyan Batiks. Hey! So I'm going to kind of talk about the process of choosing color, and we just went through that. I went through that with Scott, trying to get out of him what he responds to when he tells me, oh, I like this color, I like this color. So it was nice that he was here because I was able to have him go through the entire studio and say, I like this one, I like this one, I like this one. Um, but it's very difficult for me to follow all of you around who love to use the batiks and find out what colors you like. So coming up with new colorations, it's always interesting and different. So I thought I'd take you through my process. What do you think? All right. So when you look at batiks, like I said, there's two different, at least two different color applications. And the first color application that we do is the motif. It's kind of backwards, right? So you're doing the motif coloration first, and then you're putting the wax on top of it to hold that color, and then you bleach out the background and apply the background color on there, kind of over what you've already applied. When you go and wash off that wax, then you see the motif color and you see the background color, right? So that's a simplified version of how to apply color onto the batiks. Um, but what do you do? How many colors are in a motif? How many colors are in a background? It's not flat, is it? Batik is kind of like a watercolor painting. Um, so so it kind of has a watery look, and if you apply soda, then you've got the little bursts as well, and that helps the color mix actually. So if I'm applying the motif color, let's say let's look at this one here from our Cherry Blossoms collection. Let's look at this one. And you look here, what do you see? You see a blue, right? But how many different blues are in that? There's at least 3 different blues in that. And then we scrunched up the fabric and added the soda to make the blues blend. There's actually a white in there too, right? It's a very light, and I'm just talking the motif there, okay? And then the background color, how many colors do you see in the background? And there's a heck of a lot in the background. I think in this background, I chose about 5 or 6 different colors to work together in the background. So when you're choosing the colors, say to work in the motif, and you want a high contrast, like that particular design has a high contrast on it. So maybe you keep it tonal in the motif, so it's the blues and medium blue and maybe a little bit lighter. And then in the background with the high contrast, I played with a little bit more color in the background. Okay. Um, so I don't want it all to become muddy either, right? Have you ever mixed watercolor paints? You know, the little paint pellet that you get, and you mix it, and kind of mix it, and it's all, how come it all comes out brown? That mud brown that we don't necessarily like. That's kind of what we're worried about when we're choosing the colors. You got to choose a different level of color, the saturation of the color, but you also have to choose the order in which you apply the color. So maybe you start with the white, obviously, right? Or the light in that particular one. And then you add a light blue and then a medium blue. So then you have that full range of color of the blue in the motif. Now, in the background of that particular one, what color do you think you would apply first in that? Probably the pink, right? And then a darker pink, and then maybe kind of a brownish color, and maybe a little bit of taupe, and maybe a little bit of a dark green, actually, it's to get that color. Now, look at that. How is that color applied? Okay, that's another thing that we're going to have to address too. So when I'm selecting color, I'm trying to see, okay, what colors are you responding to with the batiks? What makes your heart sing when you see a batik? Maybe it's the tonal ones. Maybe it's like blue on blue. Okay, so I got to make sure I have some of that as well, right? For the tonal ones, the blue on blue, or the tangerine on the darker orange, or something like that. But you've got to have a whole bunch of different things within a collection, and that's what we do with Banyan. We do it in a collection, and I find that important because then all of those particular batiks work together, and that's wonderful when you're going to make a project, right? Because then you can pull those, and you know that those colors of blue and those colors of wine are going to work really beautifully together. But selecting the colors for a collection, well, if it's I don't know, if it's a sailboat collection or a coastal collection, that might be a little bit easier. That dictates what colors I'm going to choose. For instance, the water, maybe the sand, maybe the wildlife you see. That's easier. But what if I want artistic license? Am I into the deep collection? I did that. I went with a little bit of pink. With the octopus and a little bit of gray, and took that artistic license and applied different colors. So it's kind of understanding trends that are in the market, but it's also understanding the trends of quilters that are buying the batiks, that you as quilters, what you're liking as far as the color applications. And I want to make sure when we have a release that I have a whole array of colors, because as quilters, it's our passion, right? And we respond to certain colorations. I know I can't really say that one coloration is my favorite, because then it's like saying I have a favorite child, right? Can't do that. But I love the sunrise sunset colorations. I'm very much drawn to that. When I walk in a quilt store, I go to the batiks, I pet all the batiks. I just love them. But what I respond to is bolts of batiks that are arranged together that have similar colorations. So I know it's a project that I'm going to work with. All right, so back to that, as far as some of you respond to, I want rainbow bright, I want lots of color, I want the saturation of color in my batiks. And maybe it's a tonal thing, right? Maybe it's the motif is a paler orange, like I said, and then a darker orange. So you respond to more of a tonal look. And then others of you like those multis. Well, if I say multi, are you thinking a rainbow bright multi, or are you thinking something like this one? Back to this one. This is a multi. Okay, the background of it is a multi. And if we do a multi in the background, do I do a multi in a high contrast, or do I do a low contrast? All of those things need to be addressed when you're starting to think of color for a collection. Earth tones, that's another one. That's a fantastic coloration. Earth tones, a lot of quilters respond to the kind of the earthy colors, the browns and the golds and the umbers. and then punch it up with a little shot of yellow. Oh my gosh, I said yellow. Do we put yellow in quotes? We absolutely do. I love it. It punches it up just a little bit. But when you're working with a guest designer, it's interesting because they will say, "Oh, I like fuchsia." Or I like rust color, or I like an evergreen color. Well, that can be a whole spectrum, can't it? It can be a whole spectrum of color that they're referring to. I may see evergreen as something totally different than what, say, Scott would see. So I send them to a paint store and say, get some paint chips and show me what you like. I like to work with yarn swatches because they're usually a cotton yarn, and I will send my factories yarn swatches. And you can see here, um, this is how I do it, yarn swatches, right? Okay, I have a whole book of yarn swatches. Each collection has a bunch of different yarn swatches that I feel will work into a collection. Um, and I usually, when I'm choosing color, like I said, I choose 2 to 3 different colors, maybe 4 in the motif, and then I choose that many again, at least in the background, even if it's a tonal, because I want it to be vibrant. I want it to have a life of its own, right? So then what happens is these yarn swatches go to the factories in Indonesia and they match the colors that I've selected and the saturation of color as well. And so that's it. That's really how we come up with the different colorations. But back to the collections, how do you choose color for a collection? How do you say, okay, this floral collection needs to have turquoise in it, or something like that? Well, there's certain trends that I'm noticing with quilters, that you guys like a lot in Scott. Yes, we had a good time playing with all the little yarn balls. And seeing then how they mix together, right? So Scott may say, I like this palette right here, but if I layer them wrong, or if I say, please apply these colors, and I layer them wrong, he's going to end up with a mud brown. So it's really important to make sure you have enough color, but you also have to have your tonals. So in a collection, I try and think about a tonal, at least 1 or 2 tonals. I do a multi where it's not a high contrast of the motif and the background. Maybe it's kind of a model look that you can almost see the motif, but you just see the color variation more than anything. And then I do maybe a high contrast kind of multi as well. If you see in this particular, let's see, how about this collection here, Barala? Okay. Again, on this one, I did kind of 1 tone or 2 colors in the motif, and then I did a background with a lot more in it. Okay. This one, let me see. How about the pink one? This is a little more, it's kind of blown out there, but it's a little more kind of pink and a little bit of lavender in there. And then the ground is more white, right? Whereas this one has a lot more going on in the motif as well as the background. And then this is an easy one to illustrate, where you put a lot of different color in the motif, okay? And then the background is more 1 or 2 tones, okay? So in a collection, you want to have that, but also in a collection, you got to start thinking about what kind of prints you're working with, right? So if I'm choosing colors for a collection and I'm going to apply them in stripes or strata, that makes a difference too. Do I want a high contrast like this one here and then with just a shot of gold in it? Or do I want something that is more of an analogous kind of color story where it kind of blends and is softer to the eye? This right here, you've got more of earthy tones, and this is just a punch of color. And then I've given a little place right here for your eye to rest with the gold. But you also have to think about, okay, how am I going to use those colors in a collection too. This particular one, the Color Me Banyan watercolor, has just hit stores, and I think the colors are just so rich and vivacious, I guess I would call it. Just lots and lots of fun. Hello there. Who do I have? Christine. Hi. How are you from New York? So good to see you. Thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it. If any of you know, I moved out here about 4 years ago from upstate New York, and I'm out in Colorado. That's where the design studio for Banyan Batiks is, and where all of the different colorations of our batiks start. So I do look at trends when we're talking about colors and applying colors. But I also look at trends. My trends are quilters. I get inspired by what you guys are doing. I want to see projects. I'm constantly looking to see what kind of projects you're doing and how you're using your batiks. I think it's really interesting that batiks are so flexible and versatile, and it's wonderful to use them in different applications. What if you use them in something like a primitive style quilt, or maybe in a modern style quilt? I think they're just absolutely so versatile because of their coloration. And coloration is absolutely important. Okay, so I am going to do a drawing of anyone who's commented today. So get some comments in there if you're able to catch this today. And we'll send you a little bundle of Banyan Batiks for joining me. Thank you so much for joining, because this is new to me, and I'm always nervous in front of a camera. So I wanted to try this out. So anyway, thank you again. Join me next week, and we'll talk on a new topic for batiks. And I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.